A tiny hand gripped her mother's fingers, small knuckles trembling, ice cold in the middle of a gold-plated room. Lily was only 7 years old. She didn't belong here. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across the grand ballroom of San Francisco's most prestigious hotel. All around her, guests draped in diamonds and silk laughed in clinked glasses, the scent of expensive perfume mingling with champagne. And her mother Grace stood among all of it in a black and white server uniform, a silver tray balanced in her hands, back straight, eyes cast down, as if she were invisible. Grace hadn't planned on bringing her daughter to work, but with only $22 left to her name and her babysitter canceling at the last minute, she had no choice. Missing one shift meant losing her job. Losing her job meant Lily wouldn't eat tomorrow. She led her daughter to a hidden alcove behind a heavy crimson velvet curtain at the end of the service corridor. She knelt down, cupped the small face in both hands, and looked straight into those wide, round brown eyes. "Stay right here. Don't talk to anyone. Don't come out no matter what happens. I'll come back for you. Promise me. I promise, Mommy." Grace took a deep breath, smoothed her daughter's long, dark brown hair one last time, and stood. She didn't look back because if she looked one more time, she was afraid she wouldn't have the courage to walk away. But there was something Grace didn't know. Something no one in the world knew. The 7-year-old girl curled up behind that velvet curtain possessed an ability that science could not explain. Lily could hear and understand any language on earth after hearing it just once. French, Arabic, Japanese, Russian to Lily. They were all as transparent as her mother tongue. She didn't know why she had this gift. She only knew that her mother told her to keep it hidden, and she always listened to her mother, until tonight. Across the ballroom, a man sat at the VIP table without uttering a single word, yet the entire room knew he was there. Roman Ashford, 37 years old, the undisputed king of San Francisco's underworld. He didn't dress to show off. No gold watch, no rose pinned to his lapel, just a perfectly tailored black suit and a pair of cold, steel-gray eyes, silently scanning the room with the precision of a predator. Emergency exits, bodyguard positions, every unfamiliar face, every hand hidden inside a coat pocket. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Just a public appearance, shake a few politicians' hands, raise a glass, smile, and leave. But then 3 men walked in. Expensive suits, polished leather shoes, smiles perfectly measured, but Lily spotted them instantly. Not because of their faces, but because of their lips. The girl sat behind the curtain, pretending to draw with a pencil on the back of an old menu. But her eyes weren't on the paper. Her eyes were tracking the 3 men as they moved through the ballroom. When they spoke to others, they used English soft, polite, cultured. But every time they turned to face each other, when no one stood close, their lips switched to a different language, Russian, and the words that fell from those lips made Lily's hand freeze around her pencil. Target, opportunity, revenge. The glass by his plate. Make sure it's the one with the special vodka. 20 minutes after he drinks, it'll look exactly like a heart attack. Clean, no trace. Lily's heart pounded so hard she thought the entire room could hear it. Her hands shook. The pencil slipped from her fingers without her noticing. She didn't understand everything. She was only 7. She didn't know what tetrodotoxin was, didn't know how the underworld worked, but she understood one thing with perfect, terrifying clarity. They were going to kill the man with gray eyes. Right at that moment, Grace approached the VIP table, back straight, silver tray steady, professional smile in place. She had no idea. She didn't know that the head server was pouring a clear liquid into the crystal glass right in front of her, and it wasn't ordinary vodka. The liquid shimmered beneath the chandeliers like molten diamonds. Beautiful, deadly. The glass was set before Roman Ashford, and his hand slowly reached out. Behind the velvet curtain, Lily jumped to her feet. She didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't hesitate. Tiny legs burst from the hiding place, weaving through evening gowns and polished shoes. Heart hammering so hard it felt like it would explode. The entire world narrowed to a single image, the crystal glass being raised. Only one thought burned white-hot in the 7-year-old girl's mind. Stop it, right now, before the glass touches his lips. Before the Russian men completed their deadly plan aimed at a man she had never met, never known by name, but who would soon change her life forever. Lily lunged toward the VIP table at the exact moment Roman Ashford's fingers closed around the crystal glass. There wasn't time to think. There wasn't time to be afraid. The 7-year-old hurled herself into the edge of the table, her small hand striking the glass with everything she had. The crystal flew from Roman's grasp, arced through the air, and shattered against the marble floor. The sound ripped through the ballroom like a gunshot, Music stopped. Laughter died. Every conversation collapsed mid-sentence. Hundreds of elite guests turned as one toward the VIP table, where a thin, trembling girl stood beside the most dangerous man in San Francisco. Expensive vodka spread across the white marble. Shards of crystal scattered beneath the chandeliers like shattered diamonds. For 3 full seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Grace dropped her silver tray. The metallic crash broke something inside her. She rushed forward, fell to her knees, and pulled Lily back from the table with shaking hands away from the broken glass, away from the man whose cold gray eyes hadn't blinked once. "I'm so sorry, sir." Her voice cracked. All color had drained from her face. "My daughter, she shouldn't be here. I'll pay for everything. I'll do anything. Please don't." She couldn't finish. She knew who he was. Everyone in San Francisco knew. Roman Ashford wasn't a man who forgave. Grace pressed Lily against her chest, one hand cradling her daughter's head, the other gripping the small shoulder as if someone might tear her away. Her whole body trembled not from cold, but from the kind of fear that starts in the blood and doesn't stop. In 3 corners of the ballroom, Igor, Dmitri, and Alexei exchanged panicked glances. Months of preparation, the purchased server, the untraceable poison, the perfect timing all destroyed in an instant by a child no one had noticed. The special drink was now a puddle on the marble floor. Viktor Kozlov's direct orders. Gone. Igor's hand drifted toward the pistol inside his jacket. Dmitri caught the movement and shook his head a sharp, invisible warning. Not here. Not with 500 pairs of eyes watching. Alexei stood near the entrance, face composed, thumb hovering over his phone. He needed to call his uncle, but any sudden movement now would draw the kind of attention that ended in handcuffs or worse. So the 3 men stood still, smiling their polished smiles, pretending the screaming inside their heads wasn't happening, and at the center of it all Roman Ashford sat motionless. His gray eyes swept the scene with the precision of a man who had survived 2 decades by seeing what others missed. The girl shaking but not crying, the mother white as death, shielding her child, and 3 men in 3 corners, trying far too hard to look like they belonged. Roman's hand rested flat on the table. Still, patient. He hadn't said a single word, and that silence was more terrifying than anything he could have said. Lily tugged at her mother's hand, pulling Grace down until their faces were level. The girl's lips moved, barely a whisper, trembling, but every word came out clear. They put poison in his drink. 3 men speaking Russian. I heard them talking. 20 minutes after he drinks it, he'll die. It'll look like a heart attack. Grace felt the blood in her body turn to ice. She wanted to clamp a hand over her daughter's mouth. She wanted to tell everyone this was just the wild imagination of a 7-year-old child, a little girl who watched too many movies, who didn't understand what she was saying, who couldn't possibly know. But she didn't have time to do any of that, because Roman Ashford had heard every word. He leaned forward, his gray eyes locking onto the girl's face with an intensity that made Grace stop breathing. This wasn't the look of an adult regarding a child with amusement or annoyance. This was the stare of someone who had survived decades in the underworld, where trusting the wrong person once could be the last mistake you ever made. He was searching for a lie, searching for fear, searching for the fingerprints of manipulation, the telltale signs of a setup, a trap, a distraction planted by someone clever enough to use a child. Lily held his gaze. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Her small body was still trembling, her fingers still clenched around the hem of her mother's uniform. But her brown eyes, wide, round, steady, held nothing but the truth of a child who didn't yet know how to lie, the truth of a child who had only wanted to stop something terrible from happening. 3 seconds passed. 5 seconds. 10. The grand ballroom remained utterly silent. Hundreds of guests frozen in place, waiters standing like statues with trays in their hands, all of them watching the VIP table without understanding what was unfolding before them. They saw a child. They saw a furious-looking man. They expected an explosion. It didn't come. Roman sat back. The movement was small, almost too subtle to notice. His right hand lifted from the table and his index finger tapped the surface twice. Soft, deliberate. From behind him, a tall man with a blank face stepped forward as if materializing from shadow. Jace Roman's most loyal bodyguard. The man who had been at his side for 15 years, who had taken bullets meant for Roman and never once asked for thanks. Roman didn't turn his head. His voice was deep and low, pitched only for Jace to hear. 3 Russian men, one near the entrance, one by the bar, one standing near the band. Take them quietly. Don't draw attention. Jace nodded once and disappeared into the crowd as if he had never been there at all. Roman turned back to Grace and Lily. His gray eyes were still cold, but something had shifted behind them. A flicker, a crack in the ice so small that most people would never have noticed it. But Grace noticed, because she was a mother, and mothers see everything. "You," Roman said, his voice low and steady, "and your daughter, come with me, right now." It wasn't a request. Grace didn't have time to react, didn't have time to refuse. Roman had already risen from his chair and started walking toward the back of the ballroom, clearly expecting them to follow. His hand rested briefly on Grace's shoulder as he passed, not rough, not threatening, but there was a weight in that touch that made her understand with perfect clarity. Refusal was not an option. She lifted Lily into her arms, held her tight against her chest, and followed the man she had only ever known through terrifying rumors into a corridor she had never walked, toward a door she had never seen, and into a future she could not begin to imagine. They crossed the grand ballroom, moved through corridors dressed in lavish decor, until they stopped before a heavy oak door at the far end of the floor. Roman opened it and stepped aside, signaling for them to enter. The private room was spacious and opulent cream leather sofas, soft golden light, a mahogany desk polished to a mirror shine. But Grace couldn't take in any of it. She only felt as if she had stepped into the lair of a wild animal, and the door closing behind her sounded like a coffin lid. Roman sat in the chair across from them, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting on the armrests with an ease that suggested this was the most ordinary conversation in the world. But his gray eyes were anything but easy. They were sharp, focused, and they didn't leave Lily for even a second. The girl sat in her mother's lap, both hands clenched around the fabric of Grace's blouse. But she didn't cry. She met Roman's gaze with the strange steadiness of a child who had seen something she was never meant to see. "The girl," Roman began, his voice deep and unhurried. "You said you heard those men speaking Russian. How did you understand Russian?" Grace cut in immediately, her voice trembling even as she tried to sound calm. "My daughter has a vivid imagination. She's only 7. Please don't, I'm not imagining it," Lily interrupted, her small voice ringing through the quiet room. Grace looked at her daughter, her heart tightening. She had tried to hide this secret for 2 years, ever since she realized Lily possessed an ability no ordinary child had. She had been afraid people would think her daughter was a monster, afraid they would want to study her like a lab rat, afraid someone would exploit her. But now the secret was slipping from her grasp. "I understand all languages," Lily said, her brown eyes fixed on Roman. "I don't know why, but when someone speaks, no matter what language, I understand." Silence filled the room. Then Roman raised an eyebrow. He opened his mouth and spoke a sentence in Italian, smooth and fluid, as if it were his native tongue. Lily didn't hesitate. "You asked me if I know what you're saying." Grace's breath caught. She didn't know Italian. She couldn't confirm whether her daughter was right or wrong. But she saw Roman's expression shift a flicker behind those cold gray eyes. He spoke again. Spanish this time. "You said that if I'm lying, you'll know," Lily translated. Roman tilted his head. Then he spoke a third sentence, slower, guttural, full of sounds Grace had never heard before. "You asked what I like to eat most," Lily said. And for the first time, a faint smile crossed her face. "That's German, but it's different from the German I usually hear. It sounds like the way people talk in the mountains." Roman sat up straighter. A Bavarian dialect. He had chosen it deliberately, a regional variant rare enough that even formally trained German speakers could struggle to recognize it. And this 7-year-old girl not only understood it, she identified it as regional speech. At that moment, the door opened, and Jace stepped in. Roman's most loyal bodyguard wore an expression more severe than usual. He leaned down and whispered into Roman's ear. But in the stillness of the room, Grace heard every word. "The vodka bottle's been tested. It contains tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin from pufferfish. Causes cardiac arrest within 15 to 20 minutes. No color, no smell. If you'd drunk it, we wouldn't have had time to do anything." Grace felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Poison. Real poison. Her daughter had been telling the truth. Roman nodded to Jace, then looked back at Lily. His expression had changed completely. The doubt was gone. The cold, measuring appraisal was gone. In its place was something Grace never expected to see on the face of a man like Roman Ashford. Respect. "The girl," Roman said slowly, his voice softer than before. "You just saved my life." Lily didn't answer. She only tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Roman turned to Jace. "Those 3 men, I want to know who they are, who they work for, and why they want me dead." He paused, his eyes flicking toward Lily. "And most important, I want everything on her." He glanced at Grace. "Grace Harper. Background, family, past. And especially I want to know where this girl's ability comes from. Something like that doesn't appear out of nowhere. Jace left the room and returned in less than 20 minutes. But to Grace, that span of time felt like an entire century. She sat on the leather sofa, holding Lily tightly in her arms, hardly daring to move. Roman remained across from them, his gray eyes flicking now and then toward the door, but most of the time he stared into the empty space in front of him with the brooding focus of a man rearranging pieces inside his own mind. When Jace walked back in, the air in the room immediately grew heavier. The bodyguard carried a tablet, the screen filled with images and data. His expression was more severe than Grace had ever seen on a human face. "The three men," Jace began, his voice flat like someone reading a casualty report. "Igor Petrov, Dmitry Volkov, and Alexei Kozlov. All three are senior operatives under Viktor Kozlov." Roman's jaw tightened at the sound of that name. Kozlov. The name cut into his memory like a blade. Viktor Kozlov, the Russian Mafia boss who had spent more than a decade expanding his reach from Moscow into Europe, and who was now stretching his arms toward the west coast of the United States. San Francisco, the territory Roman had built and defended for 15 years, the prize Kozlov craved. "Kozlov wants you removed so he can take the territory," Jace continued, sliding through images on the screen. "This isn't the first time he's used a method like this. Over the last 2 years, at least 3 of his rivals in Europe died suddenly under similar circumstances. Heart attacks, strokes, car accidents. All clean, no trace. Kozlov doesn't like open war. He prefers to erase his enemies quietly." Then Jace's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, raised it to his ear. The call lasted less than a minute. But when he lowered the phone, his face had gone pale. "We've got a problem," Jace said, his voice tighter than it had been at any point before. "One of the 3 Alexei got away before our team could secure him. He vanished about 10 minutes before we realized." Roman shot to his feet, gray eyes flashing with danger. 10 minutes. 10 minutes was enough time to make a call. Enough to send a message. Enough to report to Moscow that the plan had failed and that someone had interfered. "Alexei Kozlov," Roman murmured. "Related to Viktor. Nephew," Jace confirmed. "His sister's son. If there's anyone Viktor trusts completely, it's Alexei." Roman paced the room, his footsteps heavy on the thick carpet. When he stopped, he turned to look at Grace and Lily with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not cold, not calculating, worried. "Kozlov will know the plan failed," Roman said slowly, each word heavy as stone, "and he'll know someone sabotaged it. Alexei was in the ballroom. He saw everything, your daughter rushing in, knocking the glass away, speaking to me." He paused, his gaze settling on Lily. The child stared back with wide brown eyes, alert, but not afraid. "Kozlov is the kind of man who never leaves a threat unfinished," Roman continued. "He'll want to know how a 7-year-old girl ruined his perfect plan. And when he finds out, when he understands that your daughter can hear and understand every language, every secret conversation, no matter what tongue they use," he didn't finish the sentence. But Grace understood anyway. She held Lily tighter, as if someone had squeezed all the air from her heart. "Those men saw your daughter's face," Roman said bluntly, without softening a single edge. "Do you think an organization like Kozlov's will let a 7-year-old witness live? A witness who can hear every secret they'll ever speak in any language on Earth?" Grace felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. Her daughter, the innocent child she had tried to protect for 7 years. The child she had sacrificed everything to raise had just become a target of one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world. Only because she had done the right thing. Only because she had saved the life of a stranger. "What are we supposed to do?" Grace's voice shook, and tears began to spill down her cheeks, tears she couldn't stop. "We don't have anything. No money. Nowhere to go. I'm just a waitress. How am I supposed to protect my daughter from people like that?" Lily pressed closer against her mother's body, her small arms wrapping around Grace's waist. The girl didn't cry, but her brown eyes were wide and still, the way a child's eyes look when they understand that something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong, even if they can't name what it is. Roman looked at them both, and for the first time that night, there was something in his gray eyes that wasn't coldness or calculation, a brief flicker of warmth there and gone, like a match struck in the dark. "You and your daughter are under my protection," he said, his voice firm as an oath. "From this moment on, if Kozlov wants to lay a hand on that girl, he'll have to step over my dead body first." Grace stared at him. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or more terrified than before. A Mafia boss had just sworn to protect her child. In what world was that supposed to feel safe? But she had no one else. No family. No friends with power. No money. No options. Just $22 in a wallet she had left behind the service counter, and a daughter whose extraordinary gift had just painted a target on her back. Roman turned to Jace. I want everything on her. Grace Harper, background, family, past, especially her husband. Grace flinched. My husband is dead. I know, Roman said, without looking back. That's what interests me. Jace returned with a laptop less than 20 minutes later. He set it on the mahogany desk, the screen filled with information he had gathered at a speed that made Grace wonder exactly how far Roman Ashford's reach extended. Grace Harper, Jace began to read, his voice flat and even, 28 years old, born and raised in Oakland, no criminal record, finished high school but didn't attend college financial reasons, waitressed at various restaurants for the last 10 years, currently employed at the Fairmont Hotel for 2 years. He paused, glanced at Grace, then continued. Widow. Husband Nathan Harper died 3 years ago in a traffic accident. Grace felt as if someone had rubbed salt into an old wound. 3 years had passed, and yet the pain still felt fresh, as if it had happened yesterday. Anything suspicious about the accident? Roman asked, gray eyes fixed on the screen. No deep investigation, Jace replied. Official conclusion was loss of control due to falling asleep at the wheel. Vehicle went off a cliff on Highway 1. Body found 2 days later. Case closed. No suspicion. He paused, and Grace saw something shift in the bodyguard's eyes. A dangerous glint. But there's something interesting, Jace continued. Nathan Harper used to work as an accountant for Mafia Trading, an import-export company based in San Francisco. He worked there 7 years, right up until his death. Roman straightened, his jaw tightening. Mafia Trading, he said. I know that name. Yes, Jace nodded. Mafia Trading is a front company for the Kozlov organization. They use it to launder money and move illegal goods from Russia into the United States. Nathan Harper wasn't just an ordinary accountant. He handled the financial books for one of the most important branches of the Kozlov Empire. Heavy silence settled over the room. Grace felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. Nathan, her husband, the man she had loved, trusted, built a family with, had worked for killers. Roman turned to her, gray eyes reading every expression on her face as if it were an open book. Your husband worked for Kozlov. I didn't know. Grace shook her head, her voice catching. I swear I didn't know. Nathan said he was an accountant for a normal import-export company. He went to work every morning, came home every night. He never talked about work. I thought it was just because accounting was boring. Her voice broke. I never thought she couldn't finish the sentence, and Roman watched her the way a man watches someone when he's deciding whether the truth in their eyes is real or just a very good lie. Roman's voice softened, but only slightly. Tell me about him. Before he died. Anything unusual. Grace closed her eyes. Painful memories rushed back like a flood. Nathan changed about 6 months before he died. Anxious, jumpy, coming home late without explaining, checking his phone constantly. Some nights he didn't sleep, just sat by the window, staring into the dark. She paused, drew a deep breath. One night, 2 weeks before he died, he held me so tightly I could barely breathe. He said, if anything happens to me, protect Lily at all costs. He didn't explain. He just made me promise. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Did he leave you anything? Roman asked. Documents? Letters? Grace started to shake her head, then stopped. A memory surfaced like a body rising from deep water. A USB drive. Nathan gave it to me a few days before he died. Told me to keep it safe. Never tell anyone. Only open it when truly necessary. She looked at her trembling hands. I never opened it. After he died, I couldn't look at anything that belonged to him. It's in a shoebox with our wedding photos, top shelf of my closet. Roman was already on his feet. We need it tonight. Before Kozlov's people get there first. 2 a.m, streets empty as an abandoned city. Roman and Jace sat in a black SUV 100 meters from Grace's apartment building. Jace raised a thermal scope and cursed quietly. 2 men watching the entrance. One in a sedan, one in the alley, both armed. Kozlov's people, they got here before us. Roman wasn't surprised. Alexei had made the call the moment he escaped. Kozlov's machine moved fast. Fire escape, Roman said. 4th floor, rear side. They moved like shadows through the back alley. Up the rusted fire escape, every step measured, silent. 4th floor. Grace's bedroom window was unlocked. She had never imagined she needed to lock a 4th floor window. Roman slipped through first and went still. The apartment had been ransacked. Mattress sliced open, stuffing everywhere. Drawers yanked out. Books torn apart, floorboards pried up. Someone had been desperate to find something. 4 to 5 hours ago, Jace whispered. They didn't find it otherwise, they wouldn't still have men posted outside. Roman called Grace. She answered instantly. Your apartment's been searched. The shoebox, be more specific. White Nike box. Far corner behind my old dresses. Top shelf. He went to the closet. Doors ripped open. Clothing spilled everywhere. But the top shelf dusty, forgotten, hadn't been touched. He reached up and found the shoebox. Inside, fading wedding photographs, a cracked watch, and at the bottom, wrapped in a floral handkerchief, a small black USB drive. Small enough to swallow, heavy enough to burn an empire. Got it. Let's go. They turned toward the window and heard footsteps on the stairwell. Heavy, rushed, at least 2 men. A voice in Russian, through the thin door. Check the apartment again. The boss says tear it apart. No words needed between them. Jace went through the window first. Roman right behind. The USB tucked into his vest pocket. They had barely hit the fire escape when a boot smashed the apartment door open behind them. They didn't look back. 15 seconds later, tires screaming, engine roaring, the SUV tore away into the night. They returned to the safe room in the hotel basement, while the world outside was still wrapped in deep darkness. It was a place even the hotel manager didn't know existed, outfitted like a small bunker with security monitors, a separate communication system, and a thick steel door that could withstand a bomb. Roman's emergency refuge. And tonight, it had become a temporary shelter for a waitress and her 7-year-old daughter. Lily was awake now, sitting close to her mother, brown eyes anxious. When Roman stepped inside, the girl let out a breath of relief, as if a crushing weight had lifted from her small chest. Grace rose to her feet, her gaze locked on Roman's hand where he held the small black USB drive. That's she didn't finish. Her voice caught. Roman nodded. He moved to a desk in the corner where an encrypted laptop sat, the one he always carried for situations exactly like this. Jace took position at the door, while Grace and Lily edged closer, both holding their breath. Roman plugged in the USB. The screen flickered, then a folder appeared packed with hundreds of files. Accounting ledgers, bank transfers, lists of names with numbers beside them, covert photographs, audio recordings, and one video file with a simple title, For Grace. Roman glanced at her as if asking permission. She nodded, lips pressed tight, one hand gripping Lily's shoulder. He clicked. Nathan Harper's face filled the screen. Grace's breath stopped. It was her husband, and it wasn't. In the video, Nathan was far thinner than in the wedding photograph she still kept. Cheeks hollow. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. But his warm brown eyes were still the eyes she had loved, the eyes she had trusted, the eyes she had built a family with. Grace. Nathan's voice came through the speakers, trembling but clear. If you're watching this, then I'm dead, and you need to know the truth. I'm not the man you thought I was. It felt like someone had punched her straight through the chest. She wanted to shut the video off. She wanted to rewind her life back to the days when the only thing she knew was that her husband was an ordinary accountant with a dull job and a paycheck that kept them afloat. But she couldn't. She needed the truth no matter how much it hurt. On the screen, Nathan took a deep breath and continued. When I was young, I got into gambling debt. A lot of money. I thought I could win it back. But the more I played, the deeper I sank. Then one day Viktor Kozlov bought the entire debt. He didn't demand money. He demanded me. Nathan's voice cracked. He forced me to be an accountant for his organization, to handle books no one was ever supposed to see. I had no choice, Grace. If I refused, they'd kill me, and I was afraid to die. Tears began sliding down Grace's cheeks. She didn't bother to wipe them away. She only stared at her husband's face on the screen, the man she thought she understood. But then you came along, Nathan continued, and his voice softened. You changed everything. You gave me a reason to live, to hope. He stopped, and in the video, his eyes shone with something fragile and bright, like a candle flame about to go out. And when Lily was born, his voice broke completely. He pressed a hand over his mouth, fighting for control. When he spoke again, every word trembled. When I held our daughter for the first time, when I looked into her eyes, I knew I couldn't keep living like that. I couldn't let Lily grow up in her father's shadow. I couldn't let her inherit my sins. He looked straight into the camera, as if looking straight into Grace's eyes across time and distance. I had to get out, no matter what it cost me. The video paused on Nathan's face, brown eyes fixed forward, exhausted, desperate, but burning with the quiet fire of a man who had finally decided to fight. Grace held Lily against her chest and cried not the quiet, careful crying she had swallowed for 3 years, but a broken, shaking sob that tore out of her as if someone had ripped open a wound she thought had healed. She had lost her husband a second time, The first time, she lost his body. This time she lost the man she thought she knew. Roman reached over and pressed play again. Nathan's face returned to the screen, and this time, his expression had changed. The despair was still there, but beneath it burned something harder. Resolve. I secretly contacted the FBI, Nathan said. I became an informant. For 2 years, I gathered evidence on everything Kozlov did. Money laundering, smuggling, deaths staged to look like accidents. I documented it all enough to burn his entire empire to the ground. Grace stared at the screen, barely breathing. The man she had thought was a quiet accountant who worried about spreadsheets and tax deadlines had been living a double life, collecting evidence against one of the most dangerous men in the world, right under his nose. Every morning he kissed her goodbye. Every night he came home and read Lily a bedtime story. And in between he had been fighting a war she never knew existed. I built something called a dead man's switch, Nathan continued. An automatic system. If I don't enter a confirmation code each month, all the evidence gets sent out. Everything. Every ledger, every recording, every photograph. He paused and drew another deep breath. It gets sent to the FBI and to someone else. Nathan looked directly into the camera. Roman Ashford. Roman flinched. His jaw tightened, gray eyes fixed on the screen with an intensity that made the air in the room feel thin. I know Ashford and Kozlov are sworn enemies, Nathan explained. They've fought over territory for years. If I die, Ashford will receive this evidence. And I believe he'll use it not because he's a good man, but because he wants to destroy Kozlov. Nathan hesitated. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. And maybe he'll protect you and Lily, because you and Lily will be witnesses, living proof. Ashford will need you both. The video ended. The screen froze on Nathan's face, brown eyes staring forward with the exhaustion of a man who had known his death was coming and had spent his last days building a wall between his family and the darkness that would follow. Grace didn't move. Then the sound came, not a scream, not a wail, but something worse. A low, broken sob that started somewhere deep in her chest and tore its way out, shaking her entire body. She cried the way people cry when they've been holding it for years, and the dam finally cracks, messy, ugly, uncontrollable. She cried because Nathan was braver than she ever knew. She cried because he had carried this weight alone, never telling her, never asking for help, protecting her the only way he knew how, by keeping her in the dark. And she cried because he was gone, and she could never tell him she understood. Lily wrapped her arms around her mother, small hands pressed flat against Grace's back. The girl's chin rested on her mother's shoulder, and tears ran silently down her own cheeks, quiet tears, the kind that come from a child who understands more than anyone thinks she does. Daddy did it because he loved us, Lily whispered. Right, Mommy? He wanted to protect us. Grace couldn't answer. She could only hold her daughter and cry harder. Roman stood very still by the laptop, watching what was happening in front of him. For the first time in many years, something shifted inside his chest, a feeling he had believed died a long time ago. Your husband was a brave man, he said, his voice lower than usual. He planned to protect his family even after he was gone. Not many people can do that. Grace lifted her face toward him through a blur of tears. He gave up everything, she whispered, and I didn't even know. Roman looked at her, and for a brief moment, just a heartbeat, the cold gray in his eyes softened into something almost human. Now we make sure it wasn't for nothing. Roman turned back to the laptop and began working through the files. His fingers moved fast, clicking through folders, scanning documents, cross-referencing dates. Grace watched him from the sofa, still holding Lily, her eyes red and swollen but no longer crying. She had no more tears left. After several minutes, Roman found what he was looking for, a system log buried deep inside one of the encrypted folders. He opened it, read the entries twice, and his jaw clamped hard. The dead man's switch activated, he said slowly. 3 years ago, right after Nathan died. The evidence was sent, all of it. Every file, every recording, every photograph. Grace looked up. Then why didn't the FBI act? They had everything. Why didn't they arrest Kozlov? The question hung in the air like smoke. Roman was silent for a long moment. His mind moved through every possibility: incompetence, bureaucratic delay, political interference, discarding each one until only a single answer remained. The only answer that made sense. There's a mole in the FBI, he said, his voice cold as ice. Someone intercepted the evidence. Someone working for Kozlov inside the very agency your husband trusted to bring him down. Grace felt the last piece of hope she had been clinging to shatter. Nathan had sacrificed everything, his safety, his marriage, his life, to get that evidence into the right hands, and those hands had belonged to a traitor. Nathan died for nothing? She whispered. No, Roman said firmly. Nathan died because he was too close to the truth, and whoever intercepted his evidence made sure it stayed buried. He looked at her. But they didn't know about the USB. They didn't know Nathan left a backup with his wife. Before Grace could respond, Roman's phone vibrated. A message from a source he had cultivated for years, someone deep enough inside the network to know things before they happened. He read the message, and his face went pale. Kozlov knows about the girl. Kill order issued. All forces, run. Roman stared at the screen for exactly 2 seconds. Then he shoved the phone into his pocket and stood. Pack up, he said, his voice leaving no room for hesitation. We're out of here in 10 minutes. Grace didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask why. She saw the look in Roman's gray eyes, something she had never seen there before. Fear, not for himself, for Lily. She scooped her daughter into her arms, held her tight, and followed Roman toward the door without looking back. Behind them, Jace was already on his phone, calling in vehicles, mapping routes, coordinating an escape plan that had to be perfect the first time, because there wouldn't be a second chance. 4 a.m. The convoy left San Francisco under a darkness so thick it felt almost solid. 2 black SUVs drove side by side, one carrying Roman, Jace, and Grace, with Lily, the other carrying the security team. Headlights tore through the night as they raced along Highway 101, heading north. Leaving behind the city Grace had called home for 28 years of her life. She sat in the back seat, holding Lily in her arms as the girl drifted somewhere between sleep and waking. Through the rear window, Grace watched the tall buildings of San Francisco grow smaller and farther away, the city lights dimming like stars going out, one by one, and with the city, she knew her ordinary life was fading too. The small apartment with the unlocked window, the waitressing job with its meager tips, the nights spent alone, worrying about rent and Lily's school fees and whether $22 would stretch until Friday. It all belonged now to a different lifetime, one that had ended the moment her daughter knocked a crystal glass from a stranger's hand. Less than 12 hours ago, her biggest worry had been finding a babysitter. Now she was running from an international criminal organization that wanted to kill her 7-year-old child. Lily stirred against her chest, brown eyes slowly opening. She looked around at the unfamiliar vehicle, at the dark road stretching ahead, at Jace's rigid silhouette behind the wheel, and confusion crept across her small face. Mommy, where are we going? Grace kissed her forehead, trying to keep her voice steady even though her heart was pounding like a war drum. Somewhere safe, sweetheart. Away from the bad people. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, is Mr. Roman a bad person too? The question hit Grace harder than she expected. She glanced toward the front passenger seat, where Roman sat with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, rapid voice, giving orders, coordinating, preparing. His world was made of 4 a.m. calls, and life or death decisions made in the space of a breath. He was a criminal, a man who had built his power on things she didn't want to imagine, the kind of man she would have crossed the street to avoid just yesterday. And yet he was the only reason her daughter was still alive. Grace looked down at Lily and tried to find an answer, but the truth was, she didn't have one. The world Lily knew was still simple, good people and bad people, like in the storybooks she loved. Heroes wore white, villains wore black. The line between them was clear and bright and never moved. But Grace was learning brutally, rapidly, that the line was nothing like that at all. That the husband she had loved had worked for killers. That the man protecting her daughter wasn't good in the way the world liked to define it. That sometimes the only hand reaching out to save you belonged to someone the rest of the world feared. She held Lily tighter, pressing her lips against her daughter's hair. He's helping us, Grace whispered. That's all that matters right now. Through the windshield, the highway stretched ahead dark, empty, endless. Behind them, the last glow of San Francisco disappeared beneath the horizon. There was no going back. About 30 minutes out of the city, Jace suddenly sat up straighter, his eyes locked on the rearview mirror. Grace saw his jaw tighten. We've got a tail, he said, his voice tight as wire. 2 black SUVs, about 200 meters back, came in from the last exit. Roman ended his call and looked back. Through the rear window, Grace saw them too, 2 pairs of headlights glinting in the dark like the eyes of hunting beasts. They moved in smooth coordination. Not strangers headed the same way. Where's our escort vehicle? Roman asked. Blocked at the previous exit. At least 3 cars boxing them out. They're trying to catch up, but Kozlov planned this, Roman said quietly. He hadn't just sent men to follow them. He had placed vehicles to cut them off to isolate the target. Can you go faster? Roman asked. Maybe, Jace said, his foot already pressing deeper. But if they've got weapons and decide to use them, go. The SUV surged forward. The speedometer climbed 120, 140, 160 kilometers per hour. But the two black SUVs behind them accelerated too. The distance shrank instead of widening. 150 meters. 100. "T'see sure." Grace held Lily close, her heart hammering. She could feel her daughter's heartbeat too fast, frightened, matching her own. This wasn't her life. She was a waitress with $22, a widow trying to raise a child alone. Why was she here in a vehicle tearing through the night, hunted by killers? One of the SUVs suddenly surged forward, trying to force them toward the shoulder. Jace jerked the wheel left. The car fishtailed violently. Grace would have been thrown from her seat if the belt hadn't held her. She curled her body around Lily, a mother's instinct stronger than fear. "Hold on!" Jace shouted. The hostile SUV tried to crowd them again. This time Jace didn't dodge. He steered straight into the side of the other vehicle. Metal screaming on metal. The hostile SUV wobbled and lost control for a heartbeat just long enough for Jace to punch the gas and pull ahead. But the second SUV was already closing from behind. Grace twisted to look back and caught the driver's face in the glare of headlights, cold, expressionless, as if chasing a mother and a 7-year-old girl was just another job. She knew they wouldn't stop. They wouldn't stop until Lily. She couldn't let herself finish the thought. "Mommy." Lily's voice cut through her spiral. The girl was sitting upright now, brown eyes wide, her head tilted slightly the way it tilted whenever she was hearing something no one else could hear. "Mommy, Mr. Roman," Lily said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the roar of the engine. She pointed at the dashboard, where the radio scanner was emitting a low, rhythmic crackle of static. Roman glanced at it. "It's just interference, kid." "No, it's them." Lily's eyes squeezed shut as she focused. "They're talking in Russian. I can hear it through the noise." Roman didn't hesitate. He turned up the volume. To him and Grace, it was just a series of distorted, guttural bursts buried in static. But to Lily, the words were crystal clear. "They're saying, 'Don't let them reach exit 47. Lily translated, her voice trembling but precise. "There's a third vehicle already waiting there. They'll block the front, trap us." Jace glanced at Roman through the rearview mirror, both hands locked on the wheel. The exit 47 sign had just appeared ahead less than 2 kilometers away. If the girl was right, they were about to drive straight into the jaws of a trap. "Do we trust her?" Jace asked, his voice tight. Roman didn't hesitate, not for a single second. "We trust her. Exit 45. Now." Jace yanked the wheel hard to the right. The SUV leaned violently as it dove onto exit 45 at far too high a speed, tires screaming against the pavement. Grace clutched Lily, both of them nearly thrown from their seats as the vehicle bucked and swayed, then steadied on a narrower road. In the rearview mirror, Grace watched the two black SUVs shoot past exit 45 without reacting in time. They kept charging toward exit 47, where the trap was waiting for prey that would never arrive. Brake lights flared when they realized they had lost the target, but it was too late to turn back. Jace didn't slow down. He threaded them through side streets, constantly changing direction left, right, cutting through quiet neighborhoods, still buried in sleep. He knew how to shake a tail, knew which turns could make them disappear. 20 minutes later, when Jace was certain no one was following, the air inside the vehicle finally loosened. Grace let out a breath she realized she had been holding for almost the entire chase. Her arms trembled as she loosened her grip around Lily. Roman looked at the girl through the rearview mirror. She was still shaking, her small hand clenched around the hem of her mother's shirt, but her brown eyes were steady, strangely steady for a child who had just survived a high-speed chase with killers. "That's the second time you've saved our lives," Roman said, his voice low, carrying something different now. Real respect for the 7-year-old girl in the back seat. Lily didn't answer. She only held tighter to her mother's hand, as if it were the only anchor keeping her from being swept away by the storm. Dawn was breaking as they reached the safe house, an old warehouse on the edge of San Francisco Bay, far from residential streets, surrounded by rusting shipping containers and thick weeds. From the outside, the building looked abandoned, as if no one had set foot there in years. But when Jace parked and they went inside, Grace stopped in the doorway, stunned. A modern security system with cameras watching every angle, thick steel doors that could stop armor-piercing rounds, a living area fully stocked with beds, a working kitchen, and enough food to last weeks. This wasn't a hideout. It was a fortress built for exactly this kind of night. Grace carried Lily inside, her legs trembling so badly she could barely walk. She laid her daughter on a small bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and sat beside her. Lily was already asleep, the deep, dreamless sleep of a child whose body had simply given out. Her small chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, her face peaceful in a way that seemed impossible given everything that had happened. In this moment, Lily looked like any other 7-year-old. Round cheeks, steady breathing, not a witness to a murder plot, not a child with an extraordinary gift, not the target of a Russian Mafia kill order, just her daughter, the child she loved more than her own life. Grace smoothed the dark brown hair from Lily's forehead and sat there in the dim light, watching her sleep, listening to the distant sound of waves lapping against the shore, soft footsteps behind her. She turned to see Roman walking in, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. He set one on the table beside her without a word. Steam rose with a faint herbal scent, a small, quiet act of care she never would have expected from a man like him. "You should rest," Roman said, his voice softer than usual, perhaps so he wouldn't wake Lily. "I can't sleep," Grace answered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. The heat spread through her ice-cold palms. She looked up at him, and the question that had been trapped inside her mind all night finally broke free. "Why are you helping us? Truly, why?" Roman sat in the chair across from her and leaned back. In the dim light, his face carried less of the frightening coldness she had seen all night. He looked like an ordinary man, worry lines on his forehead, a shadow behind his gray eyes, the quiet exhaustion of someone who had been carrying weight for a very long time. "Lily saved my life," he said simply. "Yes, but you could have given us money and sent us away. You could have forgotten about us. Why are you personally protecting us like this?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and honest. Outside, moonlight spilled across San Francisco Bay, turning the water to silver, a scene so peaceful it felt almost false. Roman was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes turned toward the window where the moon hung low over the water. When he finally answered, his voice was deep and far away, as if he were speaking to himself more than to her. "Because I know what it feels like to have no one protecting you." Grace was startled. It wasn't the answer she expected from the most powerful man in San Francisco's underworld. She waited, not pushing, not pressing, just waiting, the way you wait when you sense that someone is about to open a door they have kept locked for a very long time. "My father was in the life," Roman said, still looking at the window. "He was killed when I was 10. A hit between gangs, nothing unusual in this world. Just business. One morning he was there, making me breakfast. By that night, he was in a body bag. His voice was flat, matter of fact, as if he were reading a report about someone else's life. But Grace could hear what was underneath the sound of an old wound that had scarred over but never healed. After my father died, his enemies came for everything. The money, the territory, the loyalty he'd built. All gone in a week." Roman paused. "And my mother, no one protected her. My father's rivals threatened her, took the house, took what little savings we had. She worked 3 jobs trying to keep us alive. Never complained, never asked for help, because there was no one to ask." He was quiet for a moment. The only sound was the distant rhythm of waves against the shore. "She died 2 years later. Not from illness, not from an accident." His jaw tightened. "She died because she didn't have a reason to live anymore. Because the world had taken everything from her, and she was too tired to keep fighting." Grace felt her heart tighten. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be." Roman turned back to her, and now his gray eyes carried the familiar hard edge, but beneath it, something raw. "That's why I'm sitting here tonight. No one protected me when I needed it, so I had to protect myself. I had to become strong enough that no one would ever dare touch me again." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "And then I started protecting other people. People who couldn't protect themselves. People the world forgot about the way it forgot about my mother." He paused, as if weighing whether to keep going. "I'm not a good man, Grace. I've done things you wouldn't want to know. Things that if you knew them, you'd never look at me the way you're looking at me right now." His voice was steady, without apology or self-pity, just truth. "But I've got rules. I don't touch women and children. I don't betray people who trust me. And I don't abandon people who need protection." Grace looked at him, really looked. For the first time without the veil of fear or judgment, she saw a man carrying scars not so different from her own. A man who had lost everything as a child and built himself into something fearsome, not because he wanted to, but because the world hadn't given him another choice. "I thought Nathan was safe," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Stable, reliable, the kind of man I could build a life with without worrying." She gave a bitter smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Turns out I never truly knew him at all. Maybe no one truly knows anyone." "Maybe," Roman agreed. A moment of silence passed between them. Not love, not the romance fairy tales promised. but something rarer, an understanding between two people who both carried scars, who had both lost something, who were both trying to survive in a world that never stopped trying to knock them down. Grace took a sip of tea. It had gone cold, but she didn't notice. "So what happens now?" she asked. Roman stood. His posture straightened, returning to its usual decisiveness, the brief window of vulnerability closing as quickly as it had opened. "I'm not planning to run forever," he said. "It's time to end this." "End it how?" Roman looked at her, gray eyes cold as steel. "With Nathan's evidence, we burn Kozlov from the inside out." Dawn of the third day. The first sunlight had barely slipped through the windows when the security system screamed. A piercing wail swallowed the silence. Red lights flashed throughout the warehouse. Surveillance screens lit up, showing clusters of red dots converging from 3 directions at once. Roman lunged to the control console, gray eyes sweeping across the monitors at dizzying speed. What he saw made his jaw clamp tight. From the road, a convoy of black SUVs advancing in tight formation. From the bay, 2 speedboats cutting across the flat, calm water. And from above, Jace ran in, his face tighter with strain than Grace had ever seen. "Helicopter," he reported, urgency sharp in his voice, circling overhead, looking for a landing spot. Total count at least 25 to 30 men. Kozlov isn't playing. Roman stared at the exterior camera feed. The convoy had stopped about 100 meters from the warehouse. Doors opened. Men in black climbed out one by one, moving with the coordination of a well-trained military unit spreading out, taking positions, weapons drawn, and in the middle of them, stepping from the most expensive SUV, a silver-haired man appeared. He wore a long black coat. His posture was straight, his stride confident, the walk of someone born to give orders and never question whether they would be obeyed. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were blade-sharp, scanning the warehouse with the cold patience of a man who had crushed enemies across 3 continents. Viktor Kozlov. Here in person. Grace stood behind Roman, holding Lily tight against her chest. She stared at the screen at the silver-haired man walking among his soldiers like a king moving through his army. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice trembling. Roman didn't look back. "He wants to be sure," he answered, his voice cold as ice. "Kozlov trusts no one, not even his own men. If he wants the girl dead, he has to see it with his own eyes. No more mistakes after the failure at the party." Roman turned to Jace and the rest of his team. 8 men total, including himself and Jace. 8 against more than 25 fully armed attackers and a Mafia boss with a reputation as the most ruthless in Russia. They couldn't win a direct fight. Roman knew it. Jace knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. "We need time," Roman said, gray eyes hard, his mind working at brutal speed. "Jace, take the team and hold the front line. Flashbangs and tear gas. Slow them down. But don't turn this into a battlefield. I need time to contact our people outside." Jace nodded once and vanished through the door, the security team following in tight formation. Roman turned to Grace. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried an urgency she had never seen in them before. "You and Lily safe room. End of the hall. Lock the door from inside and don't open it for anyone except me or Jace. Do you understand?" Grace nodded. She scooped Lily up. The girl was wide awake now, brown eyes huge with fear, and ran toward the reinforced room at the end of the corridor. The steel door slammed shut behind them with a heavy clang. Grace threw the bolt from inside and pressed her back against the cold metal, chest heaving. Through the intercom mounted on the wall, she could hear everything. Heavy footsteps, shouted orders in Russian, then a violent blast, the sharp crack of a flashbang grenade, followed by panicked screams, the hiss of tear gas, men coughing, choking, the dull thud of bodies hitting the ground. The battle had begun. Roman's people were fighting to buy time, using everything they had to slow the enemy, but Grace knew they couldn't hold forever. 8 against 25. It was a losing equation from the start. She held Lily close and pressed her lips against her daughter's hair. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. She didn't believe it, but she said it anyway because that's what mothers do. Inside the safe room, Lily suddenly lifted her head. Her brown eyes went wide, focusing on the empty air. She tilted her head to one side, that familiar gesture Grace had seen so many times over the last 3 days. The gesture that meant her daughter was hearing something no one else could hear. "Mommy," she whispered, urgency threading through her small voice. "I can hear them. They're radios." Grace dropped to her knees until she was level with her daughter and gripped her shoulders. "What are they saying, baby?" Lily listened, head still tilted, eyes closing to concentrate harder. Then her face slowly drained of color as if someone had pulled the blood right out of her. "They're saying they called the local police. They've got someone in the police department working for them. Her eyes opened, filled with a fear Grace had never seen in them before. 15 minutes. The police will come. They'll arrest Mr. Roman, but not arrest those men. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They said the police will hand us over to them. Grace went still. The police. The people who were supposed to protect citizens. The people she had been taught since childhood to trust when danger came. They were on the enemy's side. They had been bought. Kozlov didn't just have money and guns. He had the arm of the law in his pocket. Nowhere was safe. There was no one to call. They were completely alone. Lily tightened her grip on her mother's hand, brown eyes flaring with a determination no 7-year-old should ever have to carry. "Mommy, I have to tell Mr. Roman." Before Grace could stop her, Lily pulled open the safe room door and shot out like a bullet, small legs sprinting through the chaotic hallway, past smoke, past shouts, past the acrid smell of tear gas still hanging in the air. She found Roman behind a makeshift barrier, phone pressed to his ear, trying to reach someone outside. Lily ran up and yanked hard on the hem of his coat, forcing him to look down. "Mr. Roman!" The girl's voice was sharp enough to cut through the chaos. "The police are coming, but they work for Kozlov. 15 minutes. They'll arrest you, but not those men. They'll give us to them." Roman looked straight into the girl's eyes, his mind processed at dizzying speed. Corrupt police. 15 minutes. Outside, Kozlov's men were slowly punching through his thin defenses. Inside, a 7-year-old child had just revealed that even law enforcement couldn't be trusted. Roman ran through every option. They couldn't run, surrounded from 3 directions: land, sea, and air. They couldn't win. 8 against more than 25. They couldn't surrender. Kozlov would kill Lily on the spot. They couldn't wait for the police. The police had been bought. Every door was closed, every exit sealed. Every option led to the same place, a dead end. Except one, a move so reckless, so desperate, that Roman had never once imagined he would make it. A move that went against everything he had built, everything he had been, everything the underworld had taught him in 20 years of survival. But when he looked down at Lily, at the small, trembling girl who had saved his life twice, who stood in a smoke-filled hallway with fear in her eyes but steel in her voice, he knew. For this child, for the mother waiting behind that steel door, he was willing. Jace the phone. Jace tossed the satellite phone without asking why. Roman caught it, and his fingers flew over a number he knew by heart but had never once used. An FBI hotline. A number very few people in the underworld even knew existed, and fewer still would ever dare to call. "This is Roman Ashford." His voice was fast, clear, and without a hint of hesitation. "I have evidence on Viktor Kozlov's organization, international money laundering, systematic murder, and most important, corrupt San Francisco police officers on his payroll. I need a tactical team at this address immediately." He recited the warehouse coordinates with precision, then continued, "If you don't get here within 15 minutes, I and 2 key witnesses will be dead, and you'll lose your only chance to take Kozlov down once and for all." He ended the call without waiting for a response. Grace stood in the hallway behind him. Lily pressed against her side. Her eyes were wide, unable to process what she had just heard. Roman Ashford, the most notorious criminal in San Francisco, a man who had spent his entire adult life building an empire in the shadows, operating in a world where the FBI was the enemy, where cooperation with law enforcement was the one unforgivable sin. That man had just picked up a phone and handed himself over. "Will they come?" she asked, hope and doubt tangled in her voice. "The FBI has been waiting for this opportunity for years," Roman replied, his eyes still on the security monitors where Kozlov's men were closing in, breaching the outer defenses one by one. "They want Kozlov more than they want me. They'll come." And they did. Not in 15 minutes. In 12. The thunder of helicopter engines tore through the sky before anyone fully understood what was happening. 5 FBI helicopters appeared over the horizon, flying low and fast like enormous black hornets. They surrounded the area in seconds, and loudspeakers blasted commands that shook the walls of the warehouse. "Drop your weapons. Get on the ground. Now." At the same time, from the bay, FBI patrol boats surged in at frightening speed, cutting off every possible retreat by water. Tactical teams poured in from both air and sea agents in black armor, heavy weapons, moving with the seamless coordination of a machine built for exactly this moment. The force was so overwhelming that Kozlov's men had no choice. Weapons clattered to the ground. Hands went up. One by one, the soldiers who had come to kill a 7-year-old girl dropped to their knees on the concrete. Viktor Kozlov was the last to go down. 2 agents approached him from either side, forced his arms behind his back, and snapped the cuffs shut. The silver-haired man who had commanded criminal empires across 3 continents stood with his wrists bound, his face gray with rage, his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck bulged. He said nothing, but his eyes, cold, furious, disbelieving, screamed louder than words ever could. Grace watched from the doorway, holding Lily, barely breathing. It was over. Kozlov was in chains. His army was on the ground. The nightmare was. Then she saw it. 2 FBI agents stepped toward Roman, hands on his shoulders, calm, professional, firm. The click of handcuffs, cold steel around his wrists. "Mr. Ashford, you'll have to come with us." Grace's heart cracked. Roman, the man who had saved them, protected them, risked everything for them, was being led away in handcuffs, like a criminal. Because in the eyes of the law, that was exactly what he was. She wanted to run to him, wanted to scream that they were arresting the wrong man. But she knew it was useless. Whatever Roman had done for them didn't erase what he had done before them. Roman caught her eyes as they led him past. He didn't resist, didn't argue, just met her gaze steady, calm, and gave the smallest nod, as if to say, "It's going to be all right." A woman stepped out of the lead helicopter. Her stride was confident and authoritative, the walk of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room she entered. She looked about 42, brown hair pulled back neatly, wearing a black suit with an FBI badge on her chest. Her sharp eyes swept the scene, paused on Kozlov in cuffs, moved to the rows of men on the ground, then settled on Roman being led toward a vehicle. "I'm Special Agent Diana Walsh," she said, her voice carrying a cool, professional edge. "I lead the FBI's organized crime unit." She approached Roman and looked him straight in the eye, assessing him the way a surgeon assesses a patient before cutting. "Mr. Ashford, we've got a lot to talk about." In the temporary interrogation room set up inside the warehouse, Roman sat across from Walsh, a cold metal table between them, handcuffs still biting into his wrists. Fluorescent light poured down, sharp and clinical. Walsh opened a thick file, pages crowded with information about Roman Ashford, about the empire he had built, about crimes the FBI had been tracking for years. "You know I can put you away with what we already have," Walsh said, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of the law. "Money laundering, extortion, threats. We have enough for at least 20 years. Roman didn't look worried. He sat straight, gray eyes holding Walsh's gaze with the calm of a man who had calculated every move in advance. "You also know what I have will let you break not just Kozlov, but at least 3 other major organizations on the West Coast. I know who works for who. I know where the money runs. I know secrets you've been hunting your entire career." Walsh tilted her head, sharp eyes measuring him. "What do you want?" "Immunity for my lesser charges. Not everything, only what can be negotiated." Roman paused, his voice turning deadly serious. "And witness protection for Grace Harper and her daughter. Permanent, not temporary. New identities. A new life. Somewhere Kozlov's people or anyone else can never find them. Anything else? The right to see them in the future. When things are settled. When it's safe." Walsh crossed her arms. "That's a big ask, Mr. Ashford. A very big ask." "I've got something to trade," Roman replied. "Something you'll want to hear." Then he told her about Nathan Harper. About the dead man's switch, the system a brave accountant had built before he died. About the evidence that had been sent to the FBI 3 years earlier, right after Nathan's death. And about why the FBI had never acted on it. "There's a mole in the FBI," Roman said, his voice cold as ice. "Someone intercepted Nathan Harper's evidence. Someone who's been taking Kozlov's money inside your own organization for years." Walsh didn't speak for a long moment. Her face showed nothing, the practiced blank of a woman who had sat across from liars and killers for 2 decades. But Roman could see the calculation in her eyes, the rapid weighing of possibilities. She pulled out her phone, called someone, and ordered a check. 10 minutes later, another agent entered and whispered into Walsh's ear. Walsh's face went pale for a single heartbeat before her professional mask returned. "Special Agent Raymond Harris," she said slowly. 20 years of service. He ran the Kozlov file before I took it over. And apparently, he's the one who's been blocking every piece of evidence tied to this organization for the last 3 years. Roman nodded. "Nathan Harper died to get that evidence out. Harris made sure it never saw the light of day." Walsh studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to meet the girl." Lily was brought in, her hand gripping her mother's tightly. She looked small and fragile in a room full of adults in black suits, but her brown eyes held that same strange steadiness that had struck Roman the first time he saw her. Walsh knelt to her level, her voice softening. "Lily, I hear you can understand every language. Can you tell me what you heard from the bad men?" And Lily told her. She told her about the conversation at the party, the poisoning plan, the words like target and revenge. She told her about the highway chase, about the trap at exit 47. She told her about the attack that morning, about the corrupt police, about every command she had heard over the radio's details so precise, so astonishing, that Walsh had to keep writing without stopping. Who gave the orders? Who carried them out? Even fragments of dialogue that no one would have believed anyone could understand. Extraordinary ability, Walsh murmured when Lily finished. She stood and looked at Roman with an expression that was different from before. The hostility of law enforcement facing a criminal was gone. In its place was something harder to name. Reluctant respect. Deal accepted, Walsh said. Take his cuffs off. The handcuffs dropped to the floor with a metallic clink. Roman rubbed his wrists, stood, and walked outside to where Grace and Lily were waiting. Grace looked at him, this man, this mafia boss, this dangerous stranger she had met less than 3 days ago, who had sacrificed his freedom to protect her and her daughter. Why? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. You could have run. You could have left us behind. Why did you do all this? Roman looked at her, and for the first time, the cold gray in his eyes softened in a way she had never seen before. Because the girl saved my life. He paused as if searching for words he wasn't used to saying, and because someone has to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Lily stepped in front of Roman and looked up at him with clear brown eyes. Mr. Roman, are you a bad man? A 7-year-old's question. Simple, but deeper than anything Roman had ever been asked. He knelt to her height and looked straight into those brown eyes. I've done bad things, he said honestly, but I'm trying to do what's right. He paused. Do you understand? Lily nodded slowly. Like my daddy, she said, her voice small but certain. Daddy did bad things too, but he tried to do what's right to protect me and Mommy. Grace cried. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time, they weren't tears of grief, and they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of something warmer, something she thought she had lost a long time ago. Hope. 3 months later, Grace and Lily had a new life. A quiet little coastal town in Northern California, the kind of place where people waved to strangers and left their doors unlocked. A new name, a new identity, a small house with a white picket fence and a flower garden out front, where yellow daisies swayed in the ocean breeze. Nothing like the cramped 4th-floor apartment where they used to live. Each morning, Grace woke to the distant hush of waves instead of car horns and neighbors shouting through thin walls. She had a new job at a local bakery, a warm, flour-dusted place that smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon. The owner was a kind elderly woman named Margaret, who never asked about Grace's past, only cared that she had capable hands and a warm smile for the customers. Instead of carrying trays until 2 a.m, Grace learned how to braid dough and frost pastries and pull golden loaves from the oven at sunrise. It was simple work, honest work, and for the first time in years, she didn't dread going to sleep because she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. Lily went to a new school where no one knew she had been a witness to anything at all. She made friends, real friends, ordinary children who cared about jump rope and spelling tests and which flavor of ice cream was best. She played soccer in the afternoons, scraped her knees, did her homework at the kitchen table while Grace cooked dinner. Her extraordinary ability was still there, still sharp, still unexplainable, but now it was just a small secret between mother and daughter. No longer a burden, no longer a danger, just a quiet miracle they carried together. One evening, while they were eating dinner, the television news reported the largest organized crime case in FBI history. Grace set down her fork and stared at the screen. Viktor Kozlov had been sentenced to life in prison without parole, convicted on a long list of charges from international money laundering to murder. His network had been dismantled across 5 countries, dozens of senior operatives arrested and prosecuted. Special Agent Raymond Harris, the mole inside the FBI, had been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for treason and obstruction of justice. And Nathan Harper, the quiet accountant who had died on Highway 1 3 years earlier, in what the world had believed was an ordinary accident, had been posthumously awarded a Medal of Honor for his sacrifice in the service of justice. His name was spoken on national television as a quiet hero, a man who had traded his life to gather evidence against one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world. Grace watched the report with tears running down her cheeks. But these weren't the tears she had cried in the hotel safe room. They weren't the tears of a woman whose world was falling apart. These were tears of closure, of peace. Nathan had finally been recognized. His sacrifice hadn't been meaningless. The truth he had fought and died for had finally reached the light. She could let go now. Lily climbed into her mother's lap and wrapped her arms around Grace's neck. Daddy's a hero, Mommy. Grace held her daughter close, pressed her face into Lily's dark brown hair, and smiled through her tears. Yes, baby. He always was. On an ordinary afternoon a few weeks later, Lily was chasing butterflies in the backyard when she suddenly ran inside, eyes shining. Mommy, someone's here. Grace stepped to the front door and stopped cold. Roman Ashford stood on the porch beside a rented car. No black suit, no bodyguards. Just a man in a gray shirt holding a small wrapped gift, looking like any normal visitor stopping by a neighbor's home. I won't stay long, he said. I just wanted to say goodbye the right way. Lily ran out and collided with his legs in a hug so fierce it made him stumble. Roman knelt and handed her the gift. She tore off the wrapping and found a thick, beautiful book, The Languages of the World, History and Culture. So, you can keep developing your ability, Roman said, his voice warmer than Grace had ever heard it. One day you'll use it to help a lot of people, not as a weapon but as a bridge that connects human beings to one another. Lily hugged the book to her chest like treasure. Roman stood and turned to Grace. In the afternoon light, his gray eyes were softer than she had ever seen them. You deserve to be happy, he said, and so does the girl. What about you? A faint smile crossed his face, the first real smile she had ever seen him wear. I'm learning how to find my own happiness. A gentle silence passed between them. Not romantic love, but something just as rare: respect, gratitude, and a promise that didn't need words. If you ever need me, Roman said, walking toward the car, I'll always be here. He drove away. The car grew smaller down the coastal road until it disappeared around a bend of cypress trees. Lily opened the book and a photograph slipped out. Grace picked it up, her breath caught. The three of them, Roman, Grace, and Lily at the safe house by the bay. Lily laughing on Roman's knee, Grace beside them with a tired smile. A peaceful moment in the middle of the storm. On the back, in careful handwriting, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people you choose to protect. Lily looked up. Mommy, will Mr. Roman come back? Grace smiled and watched the road where the car had disappeared. Maybe someday, sweetheart. She didn't know the answer, but for the first time in many years, the future wasn't something to fear. Whatever came, they would face it, and they wouldn't be alone. This story brings us lessons close to the heart. The power of courage when a 7-year-old girl dares to do what is right, even facing danger far beyond her understanding. The depth of a parent's love, a love so deep it can drive someone to sacrifice everything, the way Nathan did. And the truth that people can change that, even those who have walked in shadows can choose to step toward the light when it matters most. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We truly want to hear what comes from the deepest part of your heart. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that courage comes in all sizes, and that family is not always about blood. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the stories we bring you every day. We wish everyone watching good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye for now, and we will see you again in the next video.